Thank you. Morning, everyone. We might make a start. I can see people are still making their way back up from morning tea. I will make a start, though. My name's Louise Simms. I work at Safe and Equal, which is the peak body for specialist family violence services in Victoria, and I'm very pleased to welcome you into this session this morning. I do want to start by acknowledging the Turrbal and Yagara peoples as the traditional owners of this land. I offer my respect to elders past and present and recognise the continuing connections that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people maintain to country, to land, waters, community and culture in spite of the ongoing colonial project that continues to try and dispossess and disconnect. I also want to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people on whose country I live and work, and the traditional owners of the land that anyone joining remotely is tuning in from, and to extend my respect and solidarity to First Nations people here in this session today. This session is being streamed and being recorded, so it'll be available for delegates after the conference. We will be taking questions both online and from in the room. There'll be, I think, a roving microphone in the room, and you can submit questions through the Q&A tab on the right of your screen. You'll also find a copy of any presentations from this morning in the handout section on the right hand of your screen. For those of you in the room, if you wish to ask a question, we ask that you please keep these succinct to enable us to get through as many as possible. Just raise your hand and I think someone will come to you with a mic. Before I do introduce today's presenters, I also want to acknowledge the people at the conference here in person and remotely who have lived and living experiences of housing vulnerability and of family violence. It's that expertise that is absolutely critical for us to shape better systems and better outcomes for the future. So this session this morning, Escaping Violence, we were just talking about how this session seems to fall at the same time as so many which we'd all like to be a part of, so thank you for joining us today, and I'll certainly be catching up on the recordings of some of those concurrent sessions at the moment. This session is really about the intersection of homelessness and family violence. We know that homelessness and family violence are inextricably linked. All victims, survivors of family violence deserve a safe place to call home, and no one should be forced to choose between family violence or abuse and homelessness. However, family violence is the leading cause of homelessness for women and children across Australia. Safe, secure and affordable housing is a critical pillar for recovery from abuse and violence, and across the country, victim survivors are facing structural barriers to accessing this, both in crisis and in terms of long-term solutions. Today we're going to hear about 3 unique and innovative service models designed to support people at that intersection of housing stress and family violence. The presenters today are Dorothee Crawley, the Director of Service Delivery with Catholic Care Wilcannia-Forbes, who's based in Forbes, Central Western New South Wales. Amanda Dalton, who's the founder and CEO of Protea Place in Toowoomba. And Carolyn Curry, who's the Integration Manager at YFS Ltd, a place-based not-for-profit organisation in Logan. There's much more detailed bios for all 3 available on the conference portal, but I'm not going to read those out because we want to have as much time for presentation and questions. So to get us started, I'll invite Dorothee up to present. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for having me today. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land where we're meeting today, elders past and present, and those that are still to come. My presentation is sharing insights into domestic and family violence as one of the main causes of homelessness in rural and remote communities in Western New South Wales. I will share with you the challenges that are particular to women and children affected by domestic and family violence. In that context, I will focus on the issue of service gaps, particularly that one of emergency services, and provide you with a case study of Condobolin, where we're hoping to have found a solution to address one of those gaps. First, allow me to set a little bit of context and speak about my organisation, Catholic Care Wilcannia-Forbes. Catholic Care Wilcannia-Forbes is one of the youngest Catholic social services organisations, founded in 1996. Our diocese, Wilcannia-Forbes, covers the western 52% of the state, more than 400,000 square kilometres. Our largest city is Broken Hill in far west New South Wales, with a population of 17,000. And far seems to be a bit of a key word in describing our region. Everything seems far. Our services are in 15 branches, so within that orange patch of the map, and deliver into almost 50 outreach locations. Our service started as a one-woman show, and like many Catholic social services, had strong emphasis on counselling and relationship services, specifically for families and more specifically for couples. Our founder, Margaret Flynn, soon recognised a need for much broader services, as for years in many of our communities we were the only service provider. Today we have a pretty broad range of services, as you can see on this slide here. A bit of an eclectic mix, you may say. We have diversified in this way quite deliberately, because we found ourselves constantly responding to needs in our communities. That also meant we were constantly reinventing ourselves. The benefit was that we became a one-stop shop, which enabled us to apply a no wrong door policy and wraparound support, even before this language became part of our vocabulary. Now, this timeline here shows you our maturation as a homelessness service provider, or a specialist homelessness service provider, SHS. As you can see here, we started in a bit of a niche as a youth homelessness service. We then dabbled in running a shelter, which enabled us to put our hands up for SHS funding when the reforms were introduced in 2014, seeing all homelessness services coming under a single banner and adopting a housing first-like model with an emphasis on rapid rehousing. We operate the Refuge in Forbes and the Safe House in Burke. Recently, we have become a staying home, leaving violence provider, and I thought it might be worthwhile mentioning in this context that last year we were also accredited as a men behaviour change program provider and awarded funding for that program in 5 locations. Once again, we see all these programs working hand in hand. Our current CEO, Anne-Marie Mioche, has a favourite little catchphrase, and that is, our communities are the winners in the wrong type of lottery. What she means is that all too often, our communities rate in the top 20 of the statistics that sadly keep us in employment. Unemployment, poverty, developmental delays, crime rates, domestic and family violence, and homelessness. Now, homelessness is an interesting one. It may not seem as high as it would be in other locations. It might seem low to you. But as we know, rural homelessness is very much hidden. We barely feature on the rough sleeping count. In fact, in many of our communities, we have stopped counting altogether. our homelessness happens behind the scenes with a lot of couch surfing and overcrowded housing. In New South Wales, 2 funded SHS regions, Orana and Far West, both sitting within our diocese, were identified as those with the greatest of SHS presentations. This was one of the findings of the most recent SHS data review, which looks at homelessness based on presentations to SHS services. You can see some of the key findings here, and I'd like, oops, hang on, what did I do? No, it's all good. So you can see some of the key findings here, and domestic and family violence in our region is the #1 reason for presentation to our services. Now, what do we know about domestic and family violence in the rural and regional context? These observations on this slide here come out of a CAFCA paper published in 2015, and CAFCA is the Communities and Families Clearinghouse. I'm afraid to say that all of this that you can read here on the slide still applies. Our communities are terribly close-knit. That can be wonderful, but also debilitating, because there's no place of neutrality or confidentiality. Quite likely, the person that works at one of the domestic and family violence services in our community is known, maybe related, a family friend, and on some occasions connected in some way to the user of violence. There's immense shame and there's no escaping. If there is a refuge or a safe house, everyone knows where it is. If there's no safe house or refuge, it is miles away, and women all too often have to uproot their families to be safe. And this becomes more complicated in the absence of a car, a license, or public transport. Finally, the issue that is not named here on this slide is the accessibility of weapons. Setting aside the question what actually qualifies as a weapon, a knife, a crowbar, a sledgehammer, a chainsaw, we do have, so to speak, an overrepresentation of guns and rifles in our rural communities. So let's take a look at the site of our case study, Condobolin. And I'd like to mention here that I'm telling this story on behalf of our amazing team in Condobolin. For those who don't know, Condobolin is a small rural community in central western New South Wales with a population of 6,139. Condobolin is home to many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families. Condobolin, which is part of the Lachlan Shire, is currently ranked 16th for domestic and family violence related assaults. The number of assaults per 100,000 is double of that of New South Wales. Now, whilst at a national forum such as this one, we all define distance slightly differently, we at Catholic Care do consider Condobolin as isolated. And that is not so much because of the kilometres that you can see here on this slide, but more so because of the distance to really critical services in the absence of public transport and of public transport or transport, other transport options other than owning a car that not only is roadworthy but also registered and insured and owned by a licensed driver who has enough money to put petrol in the tank. Here we have one of our greatest barriers to access. So what do women in Condobolin do who experience domestic and family violence. And there's challenge number 2. Condobolin does not have a 24-hour police station. The police station operates from 7 a.m. to midnight. After that, emergency calls go through to Parks, which is 100 kilometers away. And as you saw on the previous slide, the closest safe house is our safe house, which is in Forbes, also just over 100 kilometers away. So what do women do? Most commonly, they present to the local hospital where they may be able to stay overnight. A referral to our DVRE service, which stands for Domestic Violence Response Enhancement, then creates a pathway into our SHS service. We have one DVRE property in Condobolin for transitional housing. A family can stay there between 3 to 12 months. Other than that, it's all about creativity and collaboration. But unfortunately, that often means that women, at least temporarily, have to go to Forbes or even Griffith, which is 219 kilometers away. The creativity and collaboration kicks in where one partner agency provides clothing, another food, another transport, whilst we continue to work with the woman to find sustainable solutions. We're absolutely delighted to recently have received Staying Home, Leaving Violence funding, which enables us to support women in staying at home. However, about 3 years ago, this program was not available to us. And we were trying to support women in the reality of these gaps that you can see there on the screen. No emergency accommodation, no safe house, no refuge. This is when collaboration and consultation took us on a somewhat long-winded road towards a solution. Our local Domestic Family and Violence Committee had discussed the need for a safe house for years extensively. Our SHS manager at the time, Christine Lestrange, embraced an opportunity that had offered itself when she was invited to one of our local Aboriginal women's groups as a speaker, and she started a conversation. That conversation highlighted that women in the community felt these gaps too. Most and foremost, the absence of a safe place to go. The women took Christine up to the old convent of the Sisters of Mercy as part of a little guided tour through Condobolin, a guided tour with purpose, maybe, and explained that in the past women had often found a safe place to escape to here. At that point, the convent had been deserted for years. A suggestion was put forward to our diocesan office, but it was to take a few more years before the local parish reached out to us and asked if we could think of a use for that building. After agreement was reached that we would repurpose the building as a safe house, we applied for funding under the Safe Places Emergency Accommodation Grant in 2020. And we won that grant. But winning that type of the grant in the middle of a pandemic was not helpful. The project was slow to take off, and whilst I had hoped to share with you today stories of women and children who had found safety in the old convent, I'm afraid we're not quite there yet. So this is where we started. Needless to say, a lot of work had to be done. However, the building was perfect with office spaces, a couple of common spaces, a large kitchen area, a whole bunch of single bedrooms, an old chapel that could become a family unit, 2 courtyards, so plenty of potential there for sure. Our renovations commenced in July 2021. Now, whilst you need to look closely to see the transformation of this humble convent from the outside, the inside transformation is quite incredible, and I'll show you some photos in a moment. Renovations are now complete, and we're just awaiting council approval for occupancy. We modelled renovations on the core and cluster model. We now have 6 individual bedrooms and 3 kitchen areas. We can turn one of the wings in the building into a family unit as a self-contained unit. We have 1 disability accessible unit. We also have a large common dining room and shared kitchens and shared living areas. We have 2 courtyards, with the central one being a secure play area, and there's another courtyard with access to car parking. And there's a large separate laundry, and finally a couple of offices to support services to meet with clients. So we are at the point of furnishing the convent, and we were very thrilled to receive a donation from Wentman Legal from Newcastle just very recently to help us with the purchase of essential packs for the women. So here we are. Our next and final challenge is to ensure consistent staffing for support, tapping into our existing resources through the SHS service. But we got this far, and we will not let that challenge stop us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothee. I'll invite Amanda to share about Protea Place.
Thank you. My name's Amanda Dalton, and I'm from Toowoomba. So in about 2018, I was working for a large SHS-funded service, and it was at that time that I saw a real gap in services, specifically in support to women in our region. And so I spent a bit of time, I guess, drafting a bit of a model, but that model was very much based on what women had told me that they felt they needed, what was missing when they reached out for support, and what they truly felt would help them along the way, rather than necessarily what a service was just funded to do. So I always honour the women who shared their stories with me, because they truly are the architects of the model that I went on to create. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to play a bit of a video, give you a bit more insight, and then I'll come back and chat a little bit further. So I had the idea for Protea Place back in 2018. Working in the sector for many years, I was seeing a lot of gaps, specifically in support for women, and I just felt really compelled to do more about that. So created the model for Protea Place, and we opened in 2019.
Decided to work for Protea Place because it's different to everywhere else. We're not a government organisation. It's not all about outputs and time and data and numbers. It's actually about real people. It doesn't matter how long we have to work with someone, we work with them till they don't need us anymore. To work with women that come in here that have so many things on their plates and so much stress and so much paperwork and so many different things happening in life, but they come in here and they're still happy and they're just resilient. So, you know, it's my privilege. I'm so blessed to have a job working with these women.
Protea Place is a place that I can come, somewhere that's safe, warm environment. I can come and feel comfortable and forget about my troubles for a few hours.
Protea Place means a safe place. When you walk through the door, you get a sense of relief.
All my life I've been from place to place, and this is the first place that I feel so comfortable. And I would say that to any woman that wants to come here, that it's okay, I was scared too.
Sadly, we know that homelessness is a massive issue in the community, and we have many women who unfortunately are sleeping in their cars, they're staying in garages, we have women sleeping in shipping containers and tents. So if we can provide that bit of dignity and support, and then some wraparound of support to help them with a housing solution, then that's the best thing that we can be doing.
The relationship that the Housing Hub has with Protea Place is that it's an indispensable and key referral point for us. When we have women who present to the Hub not knowing where to turn, one of our first recommendations is to ask for those women to go to Protea Place, have some time out in a very supportive environment, and then we find when they come back they're in a whole different space.
So with no support for women locally that was specific to really supporting them, and with women over 55 being the fastest growing group within homelessness nationally, we knew that Toowoomba wasn't immune and that we needed to be doing more. So whether it was women that were older and experiencing homelessness, or escaping or experiencing domestic and family violence, or just other life trauma, we just knew that there was more we could be doing. So we wanted Protea Place to be a safe space that women could come and feel really safe and comfortable. They could have a hot meal, they could have a shower, and get support with a whole range of things, everything from housing to trauma counselling, legal support, employment, whatever they needed. We really wanted to be, I guess, that hub of support for women.
It's all positive from here, step, you go forward. Even if you go steps back, you can always reach that where you want to go. It's just up to me if I want to do it, and I realise this now that I do have the confidence and I am worth it, and I only learnt that coming here, that I am worth it. And that's a feeling I've never had before, that I've actually felt worthy. I absolutely love that feeling, because life's too short not to feel like that, and this place has given that to me on every level.
I now have my own place to live. I have part-time work. I have a car that they help put on the road. I have gone from this person that walked with their head hung, that wouldn't look up, wouldn't look at people, didn't want people to look at me, to this person that can do all that now.
People need to dig deep to help this place, because it's a powerhouse for women.
I think it's amazing what I've seen, the way they've actually come together. And for Amanda and the team to think of this and to actually implement it has been something that we as a community ought to be terribly proud of.
Well, Protea Place is not supported by any government agency, so we felt that the local community should get behind these vulnerable women that were looking for support. And what resonated with us is that the demographic or the age of these women were very similar to our mothers, our sisters, our aunties, and that call to action to support these women was important, and that's why Newlands got behind Protea Place.
So the idea with Protea Place that it would simulate a home environment. Our building, it's situated in a beautiful old home here in Toowoomba, but it also acts like an office. But it doesn't have that clinical feel of an organisation or an office block. It's basically a home, and many women say to us, it feels like a load's been lifted off when I come through that door. It feels like I've come home. So that's really what we're wanting to achieve.
I can actually talk to people now. I don't feel like I've got to drop my head every time I talk to someone. Mondays and Fridays are definitely my best days, because I know even the night before I'm going to go to Protea Place and I'm going to have a good day.
Thank you. So my approach to, I guess, getting this model and idea up and running was about as subtle as the dress I'm wearing today. I went in, I guess, all guns blazing, and I had an incredible team of people that believed in the concept, that helped to form an amazing management committee. We quickly became an incorporated association and registered charity. And I set the service up just exactly, I guess, what you would expect from a quality and funded service, with a strong strategy, including finance, and basically every component that you needed to see. we celebrated our 4th birthday just last week, and we're 100% funded by philanthropy, by the community, by donations, and a lot of fundraising. Costs about $450,000 a year to run Protea Place, and I'm actually working with Min from the Social Values Bank just to help us formulate, I guess, a bit more strength when we are putting in for funding. It's kind of a double-edged sword. Some government funding would be good, but we don't want them to take over what we're doing, because this is based on many, many years of, I guess, managing lots of those programs where I saw, I guess, huge gaps and things that I felt we could try to do better. So as if doing this didn't nearly kill me, we opened another one on the 31st of July this year. So Warwick, which is about an hour south of Toowoomba, also had absolutely no services. And the community down there reached out and said, you know, can you bring Protea Place to Warwick? So the exact same model that we did in Toowoomba, which is we found a house, we found a location, and we needed to raise X amount of dollars, which is about $125,000 for 12 months of operations on a part-time model, which is how we started Toowoomba. And we start out gently and slowly, and then as we build, we can open more and more hours. So we did that in Warwick, and a very similar beautiful home that received an extensive full makeover by the community. So from start to finish, that took about 8 months to raise the money and then get all the renovations done and open the doors. And Warwick looks quite different to Toowoomba in terms of women accessing support, which is what we want to see, because we don't want to, I guess, have an empire of Proteas everywhere. We want them to be truly place-based and truly responding to the different communities that are out there. So annually at Protea Place, we see about 1,700 women a year, keeping in mind that we are only open 4 hours a day, 3 days a week. And that model won't change. I designed that specifically around the care and support of the staff, because although it's only 4 hours at these drop-in sessions, it's like we do 12 hours. It's you're dealing with a lot of women, up to about 25 women a day in that space, in that short amount of time. But it truly is action-packed, and we get a whole lot done. We have a lot of women say to us, actually, I've come to you because, and we're not a DV specialist service, we're a women's service where anything that comes through the door we'll try and help with. And a lot of women actually say to us, well, that's why I came here. I came here because it's not specifically DV, and I didn't want people to know. Of the 3 highest touch points, so women coming through the door generally will access 4 separate types of support, whether that be showers, laundry, meals, DV support, housing support, transport, whatever it may be. But strikingly, of those 3 that are really, really high is meals, is connection, and then mental health. And everything else kind of flows after that. But those 3 are strikingly higher than everything else. And because our program was designed on connection, it was designed around sitting and having a beautiful lunch. When you walk in the doors of Protea Place, you can smell that beautiful home-cooked meal cooking, and it's a lovely environment. And some women just come and they just need somewhere to be. They're actually not ready to talk about anything. They actually don't want to tell you their story yet. But it's having that safe place to be, because as a lot of women will, and I'm sure you've all heard it, it's a long day to fill when you're homeless. So yeah, that's basically the story of Protea Place. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, and if you would like any further information, please feel free to grab me at any time during the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Amanda. And lastly, but not least, we've got Carolyn to speak about YFS Ltd.
So YFS, which stands for Youth and Family Services, has been delivering place-based support, backing people to overcome adversity and thrive in Logan and the surrounding community. So we stretch out to Bow Desert and the Scenic Rim, which are, I guess, regional, semi-rural areas. For people not familiar with Logan, it's a city located to the south of Brisbane and one of the most diverse cities in the country, with a population of just over 363,000 people from 234 different cultures. At YFS, we employ around 200 staff and deliver services and supports across 26 different programs. Working together is a central tenet of our theory of change and practice approach. We recognise that many people's situations and needs are complex and often impact different aspects of their lives. At the intersection of domestic and family violence and homelessness, our integrated family housing program is addressing the challenges of working in such complexity. So, integrated family housing commenced in October 2021. So the initiative is funded by the Department of Housing, along with Hand Heart Pocket, the charity of the Freemasons Queensland. The Integrated Family Housing Initiative embeds housing specialist workers across a suite of family and domestic and family violence programs. So you might hear me refer to these programs as host teams or host programs. It's important to note that while 4 of the 5 programs that can access the housing specialists are family support programs, we know that domestic and family violence impacts 2/3 of all families accessing those services. Integrated family housing seeks to leverage housing specialists' expertise to rapidly stabilise housing. This then enables the family support workers or DV specialist workers to provide longer-term support to families and address other underlying or emerging issues. So families working with a team, what would happen would be a housing need would be identified, and then the housing specialist was introduced. From there, the housing specialist, the family and the DV worker, along with the family, would progress the family's housing goals. There was a great deal of then I guess what would happen was the domestic violence support worker or the family support worker, once housing was stabilised, they would continue to be involved with the family and the housing worker would step back. So there was a great deal of variation in how services were delivered across the initiative, and then that was depending on the unique needs of each family presenting and that host program's characteristics. I guess that highlighted the importance of flexible and responsive service delivery. When I made my presentation and sent it off, I then reviewed it, and I've actually mixed up my order a little bit. So we're going to play a fun game now of jumping across a couple of slides and then back, so just bear with me. So benefits of the model. So what we found was that there were faster outcomes. So on average, the housing specialist took about 38 days to support a family from the initial introduction to getting them rehomed, settled, and then stepping out. We know that housing specialist workers can get faster outcomes than generalist workers or people not working in the housing space. One of the other benefits was expert navigation. So a housing specialist worker has those expert skills and experience in navigating the housing service system. They come with their own established working partnerships and relationships with community housing providers, with our public housing providers, with private real estate, and with crisis accommodation. And they are then well positioned to establish the best possible pathway to a housing solution for a family. We know that DV specialised workers have intimate knowledge of their systems and barriers. So when we combine both, and they have established relationships with other organisations and professionals and partners, when we combine both, we know that we can increase safety and facilitate healing and recovery after an experience of domestic and family violence. Another benefit that the model has is the sharing of risk, which can improve safety. So where we have the housing specialist worker co-located with the domestic violence worker, there's real-time information sharing that happens, and it's frequent, allowing for ongoing risk assessment and safe responses, and this increases safety for women and children and workers as well. Another benefit that we experienced within the Integrated Family Housing Initiative was an upskilling of workers. So both housing workers and DV workers and family support workers. They each got to know the other's craft. There was a better understanding of the systems and how to navigate them. They became better equipped at giving guidance and making recommendations that supported vulnerable families in making the right decisions for themselves. So everyone learnt more about housing, domestic violence and child protection. So some of the challenges of the model, because it wasn't without challenges. So meeting of the minds, and what I mean by meeting of the minds is the different frameworks and practices and theories that sit underneath housing and domestic violence or family support work at times can be at odds, and there is a bit of a tussle for what the priority is and what is the immediate response that needs to happen here. Is it a housing solution? Is it a domestic and family violence solution that means, you know, immediate escape to safety? So there definitely was a bit of a tussle. Obviously, housing work and domestic and family violence work do align quite nicely because they both have that sense of urgency to them. Family work can be a little bit more slow-paced. So taking workers within those teams that have quite different cultures and ways of working and bringing them more towards a centralised, integrated way of working was definitely a challenge. Sustaining communication was also one of the challenges. So you might think, how could that be challenging? It seems quite easy, but keeping communication up in those integrated responses is really critical. Negotiating roles and responsibility. You're wanting to minimise the impact on families of having to retell stories and give them a sense of experiencing a seamless service. It's not always as easy as it seems. We obviously encountered some systems barriers in the time that we rolled this out. So really early in the implementation, we were being impacted by COVID. We also saw rental availability and vacancy rates dropping. And then of course the affordability crisis with median rent increasing significantly in Logan since the pandemic. So yeah, all of those challenges really impacted the initiative and obviously still impacting. And then one of the other real challenges is matrix management. So a lot of traditional organisation structures won't support an integrated response, or they don't well support an integrated response. So it really requires flexibility and willingness to share and negotiate management and leadership. So the housing specialists sitting inside the host team are answering daily to that host program manager that isn't, may not have that same housing lens, but then they're also getting specific housing specialist guidance and management. So they're almost answering to two managers, and then that will go further up within the organisation as well. So it really requires a commitment to doing something different. So in terms of outcomes, to date, the Integrated Family Housing Initiative has supported 196 families. So it's been going for about 2 years with three workers. So in terms of outcomes, 88% of our specialist homeless service support periods ended with families in secure and sustainable housing. That's significantly higher than the national average for that, which I want to say is 60 something, maybe 67. So we also had 92% of families exiting the service reporting that they felt safe or very safe. Families and staff have described a positive experience of working in an integrated way. And then we also saw outcomes in terms of families reporting feeling that they had more skills, increased safety and improved mental health. So, where to from here? Unfortunately, homelessness and the risk of homelessness and domestic and family violence are at record high rates across the country. There are no quick fixes, but a collective commitment to working together better is going to be key to addressing these complex issues. We're going to need courage. It takes courage to try new things. People typically don't like change, but change is the only way. And risk is scary, but without taking chances, doing things differently and trying new things, we won't learn and we won't be able to do better. So I'd say to people, stay uncomfortable. We also need future policy and funding that places an emphasis on integrated responses and funding that allows for flexible, tailor-made, customised support rather than a siloed one-size-fits-all program. Government at all levels across all sectors need to lead the way with joint funding initiatives that acknowledge people present with complex intersecting needs. People don't need this or that, they more often need this and that and maybe a little bit of something else too. So funding that responds holistically, integrating housing, safe relationships, employment and connection are essential if Australian families are to thrive.
Thank you, Carolyn. We have some pre-prepared questions that we can start off with, but if you've got some questions here in the room or at home online that you've been thinking about, please formulate those and let someone know if you'd like to get up and ask them. But maybe just to get started, actually, Carolyn, on the back of your presentation, I'm very interested, based in Victoria, myself in the family violence system, and anyone else who's worked in Victoria will know that we have also been encountering a lot of those learnings and challenges around integrated and multidisciplinary practice. I'm really interested at that practice level to hear about learnings at the intersection of housing and domestic and family violence. You talked about the value of maintaining that specialist lens and the specialisation of a housing worker alongside the specialisation of a domestic and family violence worker. Are there any particular learnings that have helped with that that you could share?
Yeah, I think what we really found that there were within integration, we realised that there were sort of certain mechanisms that supported really good integration. And one of them was that management and oversight. It is really key that that the housing specialists are still anchored back to their expertise and their practice. It's how they retain that expert knowledge and skill. So they need to be, while they might be embedded within a family and domestic violence support team, or you could embed them in youth teams or in family support programs, they really need to be anchored somewhere to retain all of that. They work really hard to build relationships, so they need to also be given a degree of a scope for freedom in their work as well. So they be inside a team but working quite differently to other members of that team. Because if they lose that, that's not going to benefit the program overall, or benefit the women and children that we're trying to assist.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Carolyn. Similarly, Amanda, I was thinking about the experience with Protea Place. You've talked about, and it's amazing that you have such a thriving service that is so entirely philanthropically and privately funded. So congratulations on that. I know that you work closely with other services, including government services, and I'm interested in some of the kind of strengths and also challenges or complexities of working closely together with different kinds of service models.
Yeah, so we have a number of government agencies that have reached out to us because they identified that, well, women are going there. So, particularly around corrections, so probation and parole, they sit on site 1 day a week because, they've an example of another government organisation that's actually wanting to work in with other sectors to get outcomes for clients and not make it difficult for them. So, we have probation and parole, we have Centrelink sit with us 1 day a week. And also we obviously work really closely with our local housing service centre and the Toowoomba hub, but also all the other community housing providers. That's how we get our housing outcomes. It really is that relationship building and having that a constant, crossover in the work that we do. And I think, particularly in regional areas, we rely very much on that. And so the results that we're able to assist women with are quite extraordinary, but it's truly only done through collaboration. So it just comes back to that relationship and collaboration. Look, sometimes it's probably more our frustration in that because we're quite small and agile and we are a hub, so we're doing a bit of everything and tapping in with those really specialist areas. Our frustration is the speed at which sometimes bigger machines move. We're like, well, we could get that done. We just need you to move a bit quicker. So it's probably, having to be patient with the mechanisms that sit within, larger structures that we have to work within that. So sometimes we've sort of sidestepped and created our own pathway because it didn't fit in that box. We often say, well, we don't even know where the box is with the cases that are coming through the door. But yeah, I think it's being able to just jump in and get done what needs to be done that provides the best and most supported and best practice outcome for that person at the centre of the event.
And it sounds like some of that, the specificity of the place-based approach that you're able to apply as well, that you've got people who are able to bring in so much really specific knowledge and expertise into the work that they're doing.
That's it.
In their community. Yeah. Thank you. I suppose that brings me to another question I've been thinking about. Dorothee, you talked a lot about the particular challenges and complexities of the rural and more remote kind of settings. And one of those I know that we've talked about is staffing for services. And I can imagine, I think that's a challenge for services in homelessness and housing and family violence across the country in metropolitan areas as well. But can you talk a bit about what that experience for your service and any kind of thoughts or plans around mitigating that? I know you're still on that journey in terms of establishment.
I guess recruitment and retention is a problem that's much bigger than us and much bigger than rural and remote. I think it's everywhere, right? And it's across so many sectors, and I think it's been amplified since COVID. We've certainly seen a decreasing appetite in employment in some of our communities, which hasn't helped. Our particular challenge is that we certainly can't get the specialists that we would like to have in our community. So we sort of have to start from scratch a little. And once again, to use one of our CEO's catchphrases, it's we recruit to attitude and not to skill. So we often recruit people with minimum qualifications, or if I may say so, no qualifications at all. So we're very proud to be, I guess, a learning organisation, and we support people in obtaining skills and qualifications on the job, and that's what we have to do to get people working in our sector and working for us. However, despite all of that, and despite of us putting out there really enticing advertisements, you can work with us without any qualifications whatsoever, and we train you. We've really struggled in the last 2 to 3 years, to the point that particularly for our SHS services, we have advertised positions 4 or 5 times without receiving any applications whatsoever. Now, whilst I guess my presentation was about Condobolin, we also have the Safe House in Burke, which is even more isolated than Condobolin. About 18 months ago, we competed against 100 job advertisements in a community with a population of 2,500, which in a way, that's really exciting because the unemployment rate is really high in Burke, and we just opened a brand new abattoir. So we were competing against positions from all sorts of sectors, and when I recently went back to Burke and talked to community about what's stopping people applying for jobs with us, because I thought it was all about us, the message we got was, look, yeah, your jobs are interesting, they are exciting, but your pay rate is not as crash hot as it could be elsewhere. So we've got a lot of barriers to face in terms of recruitment and retention, and that's hands down our greatest challenge in delivering good quality services in our communities.
Yeah, and that presents further challenges to really build that specialisation over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we have a lot more generalists. We seem to employ generalists who know a little bit of everything just in case, just so they're ready to work with a client that's coming through the door.
Yeah. Thanks, Dorothee. I have a few questions about the, I suppose, the impacts of housing vulnerability and housing stress on people experiencing family violence, and I'm interested to hear from each of you or any of you, both in terms of the individual and family level impacts and what you're observing through in your communities and your services, but also, I guess, broadly speaking, you know, there's a lot of conversations this week at this conference about the housing crisis across the country, which I've worked in this space for 15 years, and we've been talking about the housing crisis that we're in the midst of. I'm not sure when it flips over from being a crisis to being the norm, but how that, in broad terms, is impacting on families collectively as well who are experiencing abuse. So I suppose there's a few questions in there. Does anyone want to jump in?
I'll go. I'm just thinking about something that it's a real Murphy's Law. We'll finally have a house come up, but then when we, obviously because we're looking through that safety lens as well, when if the woman has been in DV, and I can't tell you how many times a particular property has been right smack bang or within streets of a PUV or the PUV's family member, or, you know, so it's, you know, that, yay, we got the house, and then, yay, no, we can't do that. So in a housing crisis, that sort of thing is really impacting for us. You know, and I think other small things, well, they're small, but we've tried to, I guess, eliminate some of the stresses for women, whether it be as a result of domestic and family violence or other reasons that they've been homeless. But we created the Welcome Home Project, which is when we assist someone to get a property allocated, they've quite often got nothing to go in it. So we go in and completely set it up for them with white goods and all the furniture and all the decor and food in the cupboard, and beds are made, and that woman and her children or that single woman just turns up and it's all theirs to keep. So that allows them, I guess, opportunity to focus on other areas of healing or getting life back on track, just by removing some of those little big issues. It might be that you know, we've assisted someone with a house, but the children go to school on the other side of town, and the bus system in Toowoomba isn't fantastic, and the woman doesn't have a car. So we will put a call out to the community and get a car donated. So we've had, I think we've had 12 cars in the last 18 months just come from the community that we can get roadworthied and checked and handed over. So wherever we can be, I guess, plugging in with those real practical things that they need right now to help them keep moving forward. Yeah.
So one of the things we've really experienced is a lack of crisis accommodation options. There is just simply not enough. And so the alternative is that we do, you know, the alternative response from the DV sector is we safety plan for women to stay in unsafe situations. Sometimes that's a choice that a woman wants to make, and we have to trust that she knows best and what's best for her. But where we have women saying, I need to go, I need to flee, and we can't provide that response, it actually is really quite shocking, and it should not be that way in this country. And of course, the impact of the housing crisis, and it's one of the factors as to why this has happened, is when women have gone into crisis, the unaffordability of rentals, the unavailability means that they're staying in crisis accommodation for really extended periods of time. And that's not ideal either in terms of a recovery from an experience of domestic and family violence. So we have women and children in crisis accommodation, which is meant to be short term until there is a safe alternative and an exit. And historically that might have been they were there for 12 weeks. Now we're looking at they're there for 12 months. So that has been kind of one of the quite problematic things, is that there's no great exit options for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've both touched on just how critical safe, appropriate housing is to long-term recovery for people experiencing or escaping family violence. And I think that the supply challenges that we're seeing, both in terms of crisis and emergency accommodation, but also long-term affordable rental options, creates all kinds of blockages in the service system at that crisis end.
Look, and I can absolutely echo everything that Amanda and Carolyn have said. And as I highlighted earlier, I mean, crisis accommodation in a community like Condobolin is one thing, but the sustainable population is then a whole other matter. And even when we put women on priority listing for public housing, we're looking at wait times of 2 to 5 years. So then again, the option is stay in town or leave town, but they don't want to leave town, right? And then we look at the private rental market, and I actually spoke to our workers in Condobolin before I came here, and I said, okay, what have we got available at the moment? She said 2 listings. One is $420 per week in a place like Condobolin, and one is $450, and the one at $450 is 7 kilometres out of town. So they're not real solutions, right? So yeah, and I think whilst I'm using Condobolin as a case study, it's one of many. Absolutely. One of many examples for our rural and regional communities.
And I mean, I've heard from so many colleagues in Victoria, in rural and regional areas, how that exacerbates those staffing challenges as well. We've heard of, I had heard so many stories of people who during the pandemic made the move from Melbourne out to regional areas, and there was an influx of qualified kind of workers who didn't last very long because there was no housing for them. And so what that means both for service users and the people working in those services.
And you're quite right. I mean, we heard this morning about, key worker accommodation. I thought, oh, this is exciting, this is interesting. And we've certainly thought about that. And there's been people who generally were interested in coming out into our communities to work there, even though we firmly believe in local recruitment for that connection to community. But we thought, let's bring them in, but then there's nowhere for them to live. So it's a barrier in so many ways.
There are so many barriers. I'm going to move on and ask about solutions. I'm really interested in any possible policy changes that you think might be needed to better meet the needs of people at that intersection of housing stress and domestic and family violence. If you've got any of the solutions, we'd love to know.
I think, and Amanda touched on it when she said, you know, there's this Protea Place is this brilliant thing that's been created, and she's terribly afraid that if government starts to fund this, then it changes and it won't be what her vision for it was, and it won't fill the need of the community. And this is one of the real challenges that we do have with funding. We need funding to be flexible. We need funding that actually looks place-based. So here's a community, here's a population, here's a pool of money, deliver what they need, rather than we need one of these and we need one everywhere. Because that model's brilliant and it works there, but the model that you might want to come and put in Logan might be completely different, and the model that's going to work up in Cairns looks different again, and the model that we're going to have down in Melbourne is different again. So we really need funding that looks at a community's needs, and holistically. We keep giving pots of money and people have to work with, and this was one of our, I guess, reasons behind this move to an integrated response. I've got to have my DV worker, I've got to have my housing worker, or now I need a family worker because there's child protection issues. I've got a legal service, I've got an employment provider, rather than actually going, here's a whole person, here's their needs, here's a one-stop shop or a hub or somewhere where they can get all of those responses quite easily. You know, we're asking people to go here, then here, then here, then here. Why aren't they just coming to the one place where they can access everything? So that would be one of my suggestions, is to ask government to think, how can we fund differently? And how can the state and federal government, and I know there's been lots of talk about it here at the conference, but how can we join that up better? Because when they don't work in an integrated way, it doesn't allow us to work in an integrated way. So we continue to work siloed, and we just kind of always just missing the mark. Yeah.
And it does take longer when you're working. You've got all these people doing all this great work, you know, who are keeping in touch by email, or maybe if they're lucky they come together once a month to do some case collaboration planning or whatever. But when you've got it all under one roof, and the main thing is, like we've all heard for, you know, however many years, you know, no wrong door. Well, really? Because that's not what women out there are telling us, is that, well, you just need to go down to here, and you go to here, and then go to here, and then here, and then maybe someone might be able to help. And these women are just exhausted. And navigating these systems is a full-time job. And when you're in trauma and you're not able to retain information and coordinate yourself or your kids, or it's just not practical. And so that's probably what we've tried to do, is alleviate some of that, walk that path without, you know, taking over, but just kind of being on that journey for as long as they need us. And for some, that'll be a short time, and for others, that will be longer. But we always say the best outcome at Protea Place is that we no longer see a woman, not because we don't care, but because she no longer needs us, because she's got life back on track and she's out there doing it. So it's not about dependency, or we'd love to do ourselves out of a job.
That's right.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thank you.
And I couldn't agree more with Carolyn and Amanda. I mean, the buzzword for however long has been collaboration, right, and playing nicely together. But a competitive tendering environment doesn't help that at all. And even having within one government department separate funding streams that are treated ever so separately, that even we as an organisation who receive funding under those separate funding streams can't sort of just blend them and mix them together as we need, because they have different requirements and different targets. That makes our lives awfully complicated, and the ones that are missing out are the women.
Definitely. I've got a question from the room. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Brian Tasker, Head of Australian Programs at Habitat for Humanity Australia, and it's not really a question, really, it's more an offer, an open offer. We're playing an increasingly relevant and large role in the domestic violence space, particularly in New South Wales and Queensland. We jointly own the construction of a domestic violence shelter in Sydney with a well-known operator, and we are seeking design approval for another one at the moment, again in the Sydney outer suburbs. We do a lot of work also with a number of different providers here in Queensland, Save Our Children, Peggy's Place, which is due to open very shortly, and other providers in Sydney with our Brush with Kindness program. And Amanda, what you were saying about Protea Place kind of got me thinking. The offer is that Habitat for Humanity can support the supporters. We are very well known for getting community and corporate volunteers together. And look, in the Brush with Kindness program, we sensitively bring people out to the places and go through the rooms and paint them all up and refresh them. And even if it's just on an occasional basis, when one woman who's been there 3 to 6 months and has moved on, we go in and we do that so that the next woman comes in feels a little bit better. And our experience is that just that helps the badly needed funds that the provider has to be deployed elsewhere in more important areas, but nevertheless keeps the built environment looking neat and tidy. So I just thought I'd make you aware of that if you weren't, and suggest that if there's any interest, perhaps contact me, see me whilst the conference is still on, or go to our website. And I understand the sensitivity, and we can privately talk it all through, and we're more than happy to share other experiences if there is any interest. So that's really all I wanted to know.
Thank you. I think we have a couple of other questions over this side. There's just one down the front here.
I've got a really big voice, so I don't really
I think for the people at home, we will wait for the mic just so that people tuning in, sorry. It's always these awkward moments while we wait for the mic to move.
Thank you. Look, I'm curious because I have a few friends who are in the legal system, and I know in the last probably 4 or 5 years, the Magistrates Court in Victoria has issued in excess of 100,000 intervention orders. And it is no higher or lower as a proportion of population than the other states. So if we put our minds to 100,000 intervention orders, that's probably the division of households. That's 200. That's another 100,000 houses we possibly need. So while your programs are great, my question is, do you think government understands the scale of the problems around family violence?
That's a fantastic question. I'm really interested to hear from my colleagues here. I mean, from my perspective, this is an area that we at Safe and Equal in Victoria are doing a lot of work in, and I'd say initially no. The governments don't have a sense of the true realities of the scale of the problem, nor do specialist services, much to what both Dorothee and Carolyn spoke to, some of that siloing in terms of the way that programs and services are funded. That one of the outcomes of that is that it's very challenging to count how many people are accessing those services. We have very disparate kind of reporting processes, targets that are looking at throughput, the number of people coming through services. We have other ways of counting and reporting in terms of service hours, when you take into account what that means for people's for the outcomes on people. The kind of data systems that we're using in homelessness services and specialist domestic and family violence services, what we end up with, I have a colleague who always refers to the spaghetti plate. You know, we end up with this big mess and actually no one who really knows the full quantum of what's going on. So I think that therein lies one of the core challenges, and maybe the start of some thinking about solutions is having a much better understanding of really how, not just how many people are in need of accommodation and ongoing support in relation to domestic and family violence, but also what their needs look like and what kinds of support will be really impactful and meaningful. Because as we've heard, it's not one or the other. It's not housing. It's not case management. It's both and probably a lot more on top of those things. That's my initial response, because as soon as anyone asks about data, I can't help myself. I'm interested in any additional thoughts.
Well, I wouldn't be game to answer what government thinks, so I'm not even going to go there.
I can.
And I'll keep it short, but I guess from my perspective, as we all know, and as I highlighted earlier, in our context, domestic violence and homelessness are still so hidden, so I don't even know if the data tells us the truth. In fact, I do know that the data doesn't show the full extent, and a lot of the SHS funding is of course based on homelessness statistics. So yeah, that's my comment. That's as far as I'm game to go.
Oh, gee. Look, I also think in relation to the number of women and families that, as we all know, they say it takes on average seven tries or 7 guys before a woman. The other really frustrating part is that when they leave, but then they go back, because where did they leave to? There was nothing. There was not enough resources, practical resources, on that very day. You need accommodation, you need resources, you need a phone, you'll need petrol, you'll need clothes, you'll need this, and not just for a night or two and then apply to Centrelink for a crisis payment to cover the rest of your accommodation, which is what women are being told, because refuges are backlogged. So they're having to motel women. And I guess it's, the stats are so high. I think maybe governments do know, but I think it is absolutely overwhelming and terrifying to think of just how big the issue is. So it's kind of like there's this piecemeal offering of services, like the amount of women that say, oh, well, I rang this, the funded DV service, but I don't want to do a course on protective behaviours, or I need to know what I'm eating tonight and where I'm staying tonight and where my kids are going to be. So I think that we need to pull a whole lot more targeted resources to the front. And there is no such thing as crisis accommodation anymore. I mean, we know that DV refuges, that's their model, but they're all full. And all the funding for crisis services, that's been gone for many, many years. So I think we do definitely need to stop seeing crisis response or hearing that as a dirty word, because that is kind of what it feels like, that it was sloppy work, or, it was just breeding a dependency and it wasn't really helping. So I think it's the marrying up of quality dignity services together with those really strong and strategic wraparound supports to help people move through with a rapid response. Sounds magic, doesn't it?
It does. Thank you. There's another question just at the back here.
Hi, my name's Alison Kroll. I'm the manager of Sarawal Aboriginal Housing Corporation, which I'm a sister company of an Aboriginal health centre in New South Wales. So I was wondering, we have what we call SAMS, which is a safety emergency meeting. Would that work in a rural area where you're sitting at a table with every single department, including an Aboriginal AMS, an Aboriginal Family Support Service, you've got education, you've got docs, you've got police, you've got ACLOs, you've got providers, and that person's safety is the initial task. It's not about whether she's gone back or whether she's made bad decisions. It's about where is her safety right now. What do we need to do to make her and her kids safe? Do you think that would work? Because it's interesting, because I know how complex it is in a city. Do you think that that would be able to be pulled off in a regional area where the distance that I've listened to is massive, and how that would then fold out to the safety of... So all of those programs that you're talking about are sitting at the one table. They're accountable and responsible for the outcome for that women and children on that day. So the Domestic Violence Court Support Police have an obligation to make every report to the Domestic Violence Court Support Program, whether it be a family, whether it be a man and woman, whether it be same sex, no matter what it is, has to go to that DV court support. They then assess the safety or risk and ask that person if they want to be placed on the SAMS. Yeah. And then they're given that support without 64 people, different services, pushing them to, you need to go there now, you need to go there now, you need to go there now. So, for example, if it was an Aboriginal person, they would be referred to our service. They would then have, from birth to death, to be able to sit in our environment, because you don't have to leave Sarawal to get a service. So, do you think it would work in a rural setting, or do you think the distance would just be too problematic?
Well, we know that it does work because we do have it in our locations, sort of at a almost regional level, so covering a number of communities, and we certainly find sitting at the table at the SAM meeting absolutely beneficial and effective. And whilst I'm a bit worried now that I'll take us a little bit off track though, because we are also a men behaviour change provider, and the men behaviour change program in our mind is sort of the glue, you know, that missing piece in the puzzle for a truly integrated response that works with the user of violence and the victim survivor. So what we're experiencing there at the moment, because we're so new to that space, is that a lot of men behaviour change providers are not allowed at the SAM table, and we think that is a really serious, significant gap. It is, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions. I'm afraid we are going to need to wrap up. Okay, one last quick question in the middle here, and then we will wrap up for lunch.
Sorry, what was that?
Hi, I'm Joyce Campbell. I'm from DCG in New South Wales, Department of Communities and Justice. I just wondered what your opinion then is on the large investment in the core and cluster model for women and children who escape domestic violence, the new builds and the support. One quick question, that was it.
Very excited, very excited. I mean, we've seen a lot of communities take advantage of that opportunity, and we're really looking forward to some core and cluster style safe houses going up in some of the communities that, like Condoblin, don't have anything at all at the moment.
Thank you. I'd say from Victoria we were very interested to see that announcement and would love to see such investment in other states and territories, certainly. So thank you all for joining us, and maybe just to wrap up, we can thank our generous speakers today. I think we're all heading for lunch down in the exhibition hall and then back to the Great Hall at 1:15. Thanks to everyone who joined from home.
No matter what they say, I just stay you're not all the feelings that grow, and even more than you know. Then I wonder if I could coerce it alive. Could it be that you want me more than that? I know, but it's not about love, not about love, not about love, not about, not about, not about love, not about love, not about love, not about, not about, not about. It's not about, it's not about love, not about, it's not about. I take a step back, just take it all in. I'll tell you all that is missing, all that I want, painting pictures in my mind. I'll show you all that it could have been. 'Cause I've been staring at fences these days, but they ain't gonna move out the way. And if I walk to the other side, you ain't gonna satisfy. I'm chasing the other side, but I know it's not what I need. And all this time I'm chasing the other life, but I know it won't set me free. How long will it take to steady my feet, to settle all this down, the forces that pull me to all that I want, painting pictures in my mind. I'll show you all that it should have been. I'm chasing the other side, but I know it's not what I need. And all this time I'm chasing the other life, but I know it won't set me free. I've been staring at fences these days, but they ain't gonna move out the way. I've been staring at fences these days, but they ain't gonna move out the way. I've been staring at fences these days, but they ain't gonna move out the way. Chasing the other side, but I know it's not what I need. And all this time I'm chasing the other life, but I know it won't. No, no. Your stars morning sunrise.
so far. I'm on a